I'd like to invite you to attend this panel presentations. We're going to start with, and we welcome our presenters, okay? All of them collectively. We start with Dr. Khalid Shouch, okay? He's going to speak to us about self-reflective perspective on teaching drama and film in Morocco, classical challenges and new opportunities. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to begin by answering a question that was asked this morning. Why are we here? Why am I here? Let me just make it clear just from the beginning that I am here just to share some points on reflective teaching, especially points having to do with my personal experience. I have chosen to focus on a particular course and on my particular experience, and it's kind of, that's why I called it a self-perspective, a self-reflective perspective. These were the parts I would talk about some matters of methodology without elaborating, of course, for the sake of time. And I'm going to talk about some classical challenges having to do with teaching drama and drama theater and film analysis. And then some new opportunities in the light of the digital guessing. And then finally, I will reflect upon the mutual feedback of between research and teaching, or teaching and research. And of course, finally, I will come up with some suggestions, as you can see. I'm avoiding to use the word recommendation because we have the verb to command. So these will be just suggestions. So at the level of methodology, I have chosen a mixed methods approach, which means mixing between qualitative and quantitative approaches with an empirical perspective, as I have just said. Let me tell you at the beginning also, is the necessity of reflecting, the necessity on the part of scientists and of scientific researchers to reflect upon science itself and to reflect upon their research itself. And he underlines, among other things, the necessity of two things in particular. A critical awareness, that is, the scientific milieu or community should put into crisis what seems to them to be evident, and B, the necessity of elaborating a science of science. In the latter case, Morin uses the word reflective or reflexive. The knowledge, I'm quoting him, the knowledge of knowledge contains necessarily a reflexive dimension. In like manner, teachers are in the process of conscious choice and design. In the discussion this morning, someone talked about the design. There should be, first of all, a conscious awareness, a conscious choice, and there should be a design on the part of the teacher in order to move on to these considerations. As for the quantitative method, I am going to give the data and, of course, the analysis of data that I gathered from a questionnaire given to students who were asked in this questionnaire, particular students of theater course, drama course in the 5th semester and theater course in the 6th semester. They were asked about their satisfaction with the way drama and theater are taught, the possible reasons of their satisfaction or non-satisfaction, with possible suggestions. They were asked to give their students suggestions to make the course a better one, where it is from the library books or from the net. And of course, there was a final set of questions having to do with an overall assessment of the teacher of this course as a teacher of drama and theater. The questionnaire was the questionnaires were submitted to students during the theater course, and all the conditions to preserve the students' complete anonymity have been provided, because I shuffled the paper and I didn't look, there were no names, etc. I got the response of all students present at the course. Their number was. In what concerns challenges about teaching drama and theater, here again, I'm not going to talk too much about this because I have it on the paper. I would like just to single out one of the classical challenges that we have in teaching drama and theater in our country. What we are doing generally here in our country is that we are teaching text theater, le théâtre à texte, which means that we are teaching half of the theatrical experience. We have no, in most cases, we have no analysis of the second half, which is the performance of theater. This is one of the classical challenges. Of course, there are exceptions in what concerns some teachers. As early as 1913, American universities accepted to open departments of dramatic arts. Such departments formed actors, critics, and even authors. They even prepared technicians in laboratories where decorators, stagehands, sound and light agents could learn their art in their art. In our English department, we are still confined to an appreciation that is more literary and often conferring less focus and efforts on matters of performance and artistic symbiotic and acting prospect. So, the literary appreciation of the given play is only the first part of the course, the second part being the analysis of the performance, which could bring together all the theatrical elements that would make the whole play. Theoretical and practical courses on property, design, lighting, sound systems, decoration, painting should be given as a complementary part to the literary appreciation. This was a kind of classical challenge, which is the teaching of what I call print drama. Then we have the challenge of online sources from student perspective. This is also a challenge that could be both a classical one, because we have begun to work with online material for at least a decade, and it is also new because it's not as accessible to all students and to all academics in the same degree. So the web has come to offer us, both teachers and students, an invaluable treasure of both professional and amateur performances. I am focusing on the teaching of drama and theater. So the web has brought something new. It gives us an invaluable treasure of both professional and amateur performances that could be very helpful subjects of scrutiny and analysis in the absence of performances, in the absence of real and direct performances of Anglo-Saxon plays in our country. Nevertheless, this is posing both challenges and opportunities. When reflecting upon the positions of both the teacher and the students of such courses within this digital context, two issues loom as both classical and new challenges: students' readership or reading, and the attitude to online source or online material. So in what concerns students' readership, and coming back to the questionnaire, when they were asked about their complementary reading on drama and theater, students had mainly a positive feedback, with 73%, more than 73% declaring that they read. However, 23% of students declared that they don't read, which can be considered an alarming rate. I'm talking about 23%. It is an alarming rate of the absence of reading when we take into consideration that these students are university students. It should be noted from the outset that students are not to be made sole responsible for this situation. If a quarter of the number of our students are not reading, this should become a crucial point of reflection. The lower rate of readers can also be explained by the long absence of reading habits. I'm jumping some paragraphs. By the long absence of reading habits until the coming of the web, with its multimedia aspects. There was, so to speak, a kind of leap from a state of no reading to a state of reading from the net. And this situation has prompted some fundamental changes in the students' reading habits, if there are any habits at all. Regardless of what other institutions are entitled to do to cope with this excruciating issue, one of the possible suggestions for reflective teachers in this regard is to organize both in-class and outside-class reading activities, motivating activities, with academic rewards and awards. I will give the example of our English department. We have been organizing, for instance, Pen Circle Prize for Millennial Writers in English. This has given some good results in matters of writing creatively. In matters of writing creatively. So we can do the same thing. Okay. So we can do the same thing with reading. I mean, we can organize the same thing. The other challenge that I call Google Ex Machina. You know, I am parodying on a Greek expression that says Deus Ex Machina. You know this. It's the device of bringing gods by a crane device, so as to save the hero who is in a difficult situation. It's not a good device. But here we have Google, who is there to open some to solve some problems. When students were asked about their sources of reading, the figures showed a neat tendency towards online reading. This figure shows that 70% of students stated the net as the only source of online reading, whereas 15% responded as having both the net and the library, and 15% declared that they read only from library books. This makes it clear that most students prefer to read from the net. This might be due to many reasons, most of which having to do with the growing accessibility of online material as opposed to library sources. This is a kind of challenge, this is a kind of opportunity. What about the teacher? Once the teacher takes seriously into consideration the current trend of things, he or she will consciously reflect upon his or her situation in a positive and pragmatic way, and will take over these new materials and skills and appropriate them for the benefit of the teaching function. Within this jungle, even the phenomenon of plagiarism will be treated in a direct way. Here again, instead of playing the role of the guard of the forbidden fruit, the reflective teacher is required first to show students what plagiarism is, and second, to show them how to benefit from the net without getting into any form of plagiarism. So I'm going to skip some. Yes, learner-based teaching. I'm not talking about theories of education. I am talking about theories of, I'm talking about theories of teaching drama and theater. And of course, the learner's feedback is very important in this case. When they were asked about their preferences, for instance, for modern or classical drama, you can see 63% preferred modern or contemporary drama, while 36% preferred classical drama. This doesn't mean that we should discard classical drama. This means that there is still a great number of students who prefer classical drama. So it is to be, for instance, it is to be kept just as an example. It should be kept, and they are, of course, in this context. When reflecting on the matter, I cannot personally imagine a Moroccan English department syllabus in which there is no or little room for Chaucer's, Marlowe's, Shakespeare's, Congreve, and Sophocles. It is indeed the way of teaching, learning, approaching, and discussing such works that needs to be reconsidered. Yes, I have talked about, of course, in my paper, I have talked about the opportunities given by online sources. I haven't time, so I'm going to give just a summary of things. I suggest the integration of online material in the course, especially audiovisual material in film studies and also in drama studies, in televised performances or film adaptations of some plays. For instance, student suggestions to make the course better, you can see that many of them, about 55%, which means both those who opted for analyzing film representation in blue light blue color and also in red color, scheduling videos or video presentations. When we gather these figures, we have more than 50, okay, we have 1 minute? Okay, we have more than 55% of students who prefer analyzing film presentations and scheduling video presentations of drama and theater. So I'm going to skip just to my conclusion. These are just a set of suggestions that are on the paper. The necessity of reflecting after reflective teaching, the importance of students' perspectives in reflective teaching through focused questionnaires, of course, organizing reading days and award-winning prizes for reading, incorporating web material in the courses of drama and theater and film studies, especially video and filmic material, taking training sessions for the sake of professional development on the part of teachers, of course, in order to master, for instance, video software programs, especially for the teacher or the research supervisor on film analysis and film studies, on the integration of online sources in the course, training sessions on hosting courses on e-learning platforms such as Moodle, introducing and facilitating web-based learning for both teachers and students, training sessions for students on the web and e-learning platform, establishing and providing on the part of the university officials the adequate learning management systems, the conscious reflection is one point I would like you to think about. The conscious reflection after the mutual feedback of research and teaching in both directions, I mean from teaching to research and from research to teaching, and taking into consideration the students' feedback in any self-assessment. And this I did with students. I gave them a series of questions to assess the teacher, and this is the results from 8 over 10, 7 over 10, 5 over 10, 6 over 10, 0 over 10, etc. And I have this. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Shawish, for this interesting presentation. I invite him in the audience to take notes of remarks and to prepare questions for Mr. Shawish. I would like now to give the floor to our Professor Bouchaid Bouzid Al-Tayyib to speak to, from the University of Sila, Algeria, to speak to us about enhancing would-be teachers' educational psychology, training and development of thinking, cognition, knowledge, and the way they learn how to teach. So the floor is yours, Professor Bouzid.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Our great thanks go to the organizing committee under the helm of Mr. Varus. So my presentation is entitled Enhancing Would-Be Teachers, Educational Psychology, Training and Development of Thinking, Cognition, Knowledge, and the Way Learners Learn How to Teach. So this is another page turned towards the students' training and the importance of the educational psychology in the syllabus. The trainee's educational package, the core elementary basic questions that a future teacher should have. What is education? What is teaching? What is learning? What is psychology? What is pedagogy? What is andragogy? And what is pedagogy? What is educational psychology? What service does educational psychology offer to would-be teachers in training service? As introduction, psychological perspectives shifted from behavioral to cognitive in the 70s. So a number of researchers began to focus on the thinking processes, including cognition, perception, and memory in teaching. Knowledge of psychology has become a crucial cornerstone, hence resorting to educational psychology and psychology education is a must for the preparation of would-be teachers. Teachers need to possess psychological knowledge to understand the recipients' attitudes, tastes, and drives, and observe the way they solve their own problems. To step forward to the understanding of learners' mentalities and cognitive powers, the way learners learn, how they react, how they question, and how they reason. We have two problematics. Problematic one, most of would-be pre-service teachers today lack sufficient training that qualifies them to enter into profession with enough and ease. This is due to the lack of mastery to both cognitive and psychological aspects. Future teachers don't realize the importance of teaching the young kids until they are faced with reality. Teachers think the very good lessons they have learned at their incubation training period are enough, but the reality proves another. Hence, teachers need to reinforce their learners' psychological states by enhancing them with more educational psychology to equip them to cater for the difficult learners' needs. Problematic two, the problem facing the trainer teachers is that they teach their learners through whatever methods, delivering lessons to end up a given syllabus without paying too much regards to the psychological understanding of the recipients. To achieve such a success, a number of research questions are raised. What should trainers do to perceive the type of knowledge that trainees need to acquire? Which method is best to know what trainees need in their life learning and professional career? How do trainers know how their trainees think? What would teachers include in the syllabus to help trainees understand better how their trainees respond, think, perceive, analyze, and react? Trainees' beliefs and attitudes towards teaching. Pre-service teachers, upon entering their preparation program, hold a simplistic view of the teaching profession. They believe that teaching is easy and that teaching merely involves transmitting information. Many pre-service teachers enter the program with high confidence in their ability to perform well in the profession. Many teachers, when selecting this teaching vocation trade, think they would be good teachers because it is their own choice and desire. Trainees, keys to professional career. What is education? What is teaching? What is learning? We skip these definitions. What is psychology? It is simply the scientific study of mind and behavior, or behavior and mental processes. What is educational psychology as a core of our presentation? It's simply a combination of psychology and education. A distinct scientific discipline within psychology that includes both methods of study and the knowledge base. It is the scientific discipline that addresses the questions, why do some students learn more than others? And what can be done to improve that learning? Educational psychology is concerned primarily with understanding the processes of teaching and learning that take place within formal environments. Pre-service education context. Pre-service education provides the first step in the professional development of teachers. It exposes pre-service teachers to new perspectives as well as prepares them in knowledge and skills. Knowledge includes disciplinary content or subject knowledge and pedagogical content knowledge or knowledge of how to teach. This forms the basis for quality practice that teachers, trainers need to have a perceptive view about. Discussion. Trainees need to be trained on how they learn about their future students by studying a series of lessons on the innate capacities of their learners. The individual differences existing within learners, the introvert learner, the extrovert learner, the conscious as well as the unconscious behavior of the learner, the characteristics of his growth and development, and each stage beginning from childhood to adulthood. See Piaget's cognitive theory. How educational psychology helps trainees in their professional career. Trainee teachers should be introduced into the role of the teacher as a working power in the teaching learning process. His role is in knowing himself first, his inspirations, his training, his reactions, his psychological aspects that help him know his learners, their individual differences, their needs, and their motivational drives and his attitudes. Trainee psychology's education credit will enhance learners' to give them an idea about the growth and development of the child. How does educational psychology help? Trainees will have opportunities to study the nature and development of the personality of an individual and introduces them to the study of the learner's individual differences. Thanks to educational psychology, trainees will at last form an idea about their learners' intelligence, which helps them know the students that need tutorship, that need guidance and counseling. The role of educational psychology again. McGrath and Costa portray 5 factors that help the teacher know the personality of his students. We have hostile versus agreeableness, introversion versus extroversion, impulsive versus conscientious, neuroticism versus emotional stability, intellectual narrowness versus intellectual openness. Human development and cognition, a branch of educational psychology, draws on insight from a range of fields that deal with learning and development. Trainee teachers should imbibe from this field to be able to know and understand how do children learn, what makes children want to learn, how can teachers create contexts in which all children benefit from instruction, how can we help children and youth develop into healthy, happy, and productive adults. How does learning happen outside of schools, in workplaces, in museums, and other informal settings? Knowledge and the way trainees learn how to teach. Pre-service teachers intending to aspire for professionalism need to possess both cognitive insight that involves learners' self-awareness of their own cognitions, through which they acquire information and gain understanding, and psychological know-how to use classroom metacognitive strategies about teaching, which include self-awareness and ability to reflect on one's own cognitive knowledge. As recommendations, we select 2 on the recommendations. Maybe number 2, trainees' training textbooks and syllabi should clearly specify through clear-cut objectives the use of psychology as a critical core in their training and formation. 3, educational psychology should take the lion's share. Its role should be reflected through teachers' work. Having an understanding of one's own personality as a teacher and the personality of learners will have great implications in the preparation of lessons through learners' needs analysis. Recommendation 2, trainees need to acquire which learning experiences could be suitable for their learners and at which stage these could be implemented and under what learning process. Trainees need to learn about educational psychology laws, principles and theories of learning as remembering, forgetting, perceiving, concept formation, thinking and reasoning, problem solving, transfer of learning, ways and means of effective learning. Just then, trainees need to be introduced on how to secure good classroom climate for learning by studying topics like classroom climate and group dynamics, techniques and aids that facilitate learning and evaluation, techniques and practices, guidance and counseling so as to create efficiency in learning. As a conclusion, a careful scrutiny to the contents related to pre-service teacher training, higher schools need to be strongly revisited by giving a lion's share to educational psychology and the psychology of education. As inculcating learners' minds with knowledge does not suffice in an age where pedagogy and psychology reign, learners need to imbue from the knacks of pedagogy with the intention to control and master their classes efficiently. The young generation of today is harsh to manipulate and harness. Hence, a bit of pedagogical policy will incite learners not to deviate from the norms. In this respect, we highly recommend educationists and educational psychologists to share hands in developing a strong curriculum that serves the would-be teachers, not to strive for teaching adequately, but to restore order, discipline, and motivation within classrooms. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Tayyib, for this extremely rich presentation. And I would like to invite the audience to prepare questions, for our speaker. Next, we would like to welcome Professor Benmaki, who is going to speak to us about teachers' attitudes towards professional development and reflective teaching.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank the organizing committee for this opportunity to discuss issues related to reflective teaching and professional development. Second, I would like to thank all my professors at Ibn Tufayl University. Special thanks to my supervisor, Professor Afkin. As you see, today's topic is about teachers' attitudes towards reflective teaching and professional development. Today, I'm not going to talk about theory because we have heard a lot about theory. So let's come back to reality. As an outline for this presentation, I'm going to start with an introduction, the problem, objectives, significance of the study, data collection method, results of the study, recommendations, and the conclusion. First thing I would like to say is that this presentation is about sharing results of a study that I've conducted in research division where I'm working. Now, the first question that we might ask is why talking about attitudes? From my experience as a teacher of English and from my daily contact with colleagues, I think that the real problem facing teachers' professional development and engaging in this process of reflective teaching is related to the teachers' attitudes themselves. Because if we understand what attitudes the teachers have, we can understand what factors determine these attitudes and therefore judge their practices, behaviors, and actions. Now, the objective of the study is to describe what are these attitudes like. When I say to describe, I don't mean to describe in terms of positive or negative, but to say value judgment, because it's not easy to identify as and to qualify as we are going to see. I suppose that this study would be significant to us teachers, teacher trainers, supervisors, researchers, and education policy makers, in the sense that if we understand these attitudes, we can select the best approach or the most effective approach that we can adopt for reflective teaching and professional development purposes. Concerning the data collection method, I would like to start with the informants. The informants of my study are teachers of English at high school in Khouizat. I know that the population is not really representative. It's because of time constraints, but I'm not claiming that I will be providing a clear image and a broader and representative image of all teachers in Moroccan educational system. Concerning the method, I have used the questionnaire, and this questionnaire includes three main parts. The first part targets teachers' attitudes towards reflective teaching. The second part is about teachers' attitudes towards reflective teaching, while the last part is about teachers' attitudes towards ICT use as a means for reflective teaching and professional development. Concerning the results about the first section, I would like to start with the professional development. And here the first question was, do you think that teachers' professional development is a choice or necessity? And as you can see, 90% of the informants, more than 90% of the informants say yes, it's a necessity. They admit that it is necessary to change. So when we talk about professional development, we talk about change. But there are 10% of the informants still say that it's not. It's just a choice. It's not necessary. We don't need change. maybe the justification about this we don't need change can come back to the presentation of Professor Anzian when he talks about safety. We love safety, and also about the notion introduced by Professor Darouz. Change is about moving from the known to the unknown. So it's better to stay in the known stage. Concerning professional development, I also asked questions about change. And as you can see from the third question is, it's the need adaptive change. They admit that you need 100% of the informants say they need adaptive to change, and that change is necessary, and that they are willing to change. The next question was about experience. Is experience enough for professional development? And most of the teachers say no. So experience needs to be accompanied with other things. It's not through the years that you are going to gain this level of professional development. The last question in this, it's not the last, the one before the last, is about teachers' responsibility. Whose responsibility is it, you think, the teacher development? Is it the teacher's responsibility or the others? And here we noticed that it's about the percentage is really high, considering those who say, yes, it is my responsibility, but still those who claim that it's not the responsibility, the percentage is really significant. Means that it's not my responsibility. I'm not responsible for this professional development. I will be waiting in my class for somebody to help me, or to make me, to make or to help. To help is less. The last point about professional development is related to learning. When we talk about professional development, it's not teaching priority. It's also about learning. And all, if not most of us teachers, if not all, have this tendency that teaching practices need change. But the problem is that how do you make changes? Is it because just you feel that you need to change? Or because your changes are based on fieldwork studies, means that from the classroom action research in your class? Do you base your changes on the findings, on the results of your studies that you conduct in class, or because of this feeling that we need to change, to follow? The second part is about reflective teaching, and we have different ways to reflect upon our teaching process, including peer observation, keeping journals, videotaping, and peer observation, and discussing with colleagues. Concerning the peer observation, we noticed that the first one is about peer observation, means to observe, to attend classes to observe. How many teachers have already attended the classes to observe their colleagues teaching? 70%. And when it comes to the second one, peer observation to be observed, we have just 50%. Means that we like to observe people, but we don't like to be observed. The next one is about keeping journals, and here we noticed that 70% of the informants have never kept any journals. Means that there is no kind of reflective teaching. Discussion. Yes, the percentage is very high. It's clear that we discuss. Teachers meet to discuss. But what do they talk about? What do they discuss? And when they identify the problems, do they stop at we have a lot of classroom problems. Do they stop at the first stage? If you still remember Professor Wakrim's presentation as the weak form of reflection. Means there is no action afterwards. So we stop at the level of sharing problems, and that's all. And most of the time you find teachers talking about their personal worries and no formal or systematic reflection upon the teaching and the learning processes. The second, the next point is about filming. Have you ever filmed yourself while teaching? And here the percentage is very high of the response says no, I have never filmed myself teaching, and means that there is a threat of ICT. We are afraid of ICT. We don't want to be. This is another support for not wanting to be observed. And the next one is about self-evaluation. When we talk about self-evaluation, the informant says yes, we do self-evaluation, although I think I doubt it. And the percentage is very high, I think. And the next question was about self-evaluation. How do you evaluate yourself or your lesson? After your students leave the class, do you sit down and you fill in a grade or answer a questionnaire, or what do you do? And they say, on the basis of my impression. Is that evaluation? Learner unwillingness to learn. We have this tendency that our learners, we are doing our job, and the learners are not willing to learn. They have a lot of opportunities that we didn't have, but the students are not willing to learn. But my question was, do you know why? Have you ever tried to know why your students don't want to learn? And if you, as you can see, 50% says, no, we don't know why. We don't want to learn, and we don't know why. So where is research? Where is reflection? The next point is about this ICT notion. Have you ever received training? Would you like to receive online training? Yes, we would like to do. So there is positive attitude, I think, towards ICT use. But here I have a problem with the third question concerning video camera, the presence of a video camera. Would you accept the presence of a video camera in your class? And here, if we notice that we say no. Most of the teachers say no, we don't accept the presence of a video camera in our classes. Means that, yes, we want ICT, but at the same time we have a problem with our attitudes. We are not clear about what do we want from ICT and what is it that we don't want. And most of the teachers say, yes, we are ready to learn. So as I said, there is such a positive attitude toward ICT use, but I don't think so. I don't think that this is really true, because I want to mention something that when we talk about teacher professional development, we should not talk about just our colleagues that are here and university teachers. We should bear in mind primary school teachers in far rural areas that are struggling with other things and obstacles. I'm not saying here that there are obstacles there not to stop, but I'm saying that we should move to reality, start from reality. What are the opportunities available, and work on those opportunities, and through those opportunities to reach this level of reflective teaching and professional development. Recommendations of the study. I think it's not easy to talk about, not easy to qualify these attitudes, not easy to say what are these attitudes really like, because I say first because of the number of the informants, it's not really representative of the whole teaching community in the Moroccan context, which means that we need further study for this issue of attitude. Because if we understand these attitudes, what are the factors that determine these attitudes, we can, I think, better suggest ways, approaches for professional development. Because this deep understanding would provide us with an answer to what is missing in the teacher's attitudes, and how we can make use of these attitudes. The last point I started with the idea that I think that professional development, teachers' attitudes is the obstacle towards professional development. And I think it's at the same time, if better understood and investigated, it would be the key. The key is within the teachers' attitudes, within the teachers' minds. And before I say thank you, I would like to have a message for us all. We should not leave. I think we should not leave this conference at this level. Otherwise, we are living at the weak form reflection stage that Professor Wakim talked about. We should go deeper into reality. Let's come back to reality. What really happens? We all know. I have been hearing a lot about this word should, repeated a lot. But what do we do in reality? I know as a teacher that's what I should do. But what do I do in reality? As soon as the bell rings, I leave the class, or before the ring sometimes. A recommendation, I think, if I have the right to, recommendation for the study and for the conference, please, no should be statements. No should be statements means, I think that we should not use this, although I'm asking you not to use should, I'm using it. Which means that there is a problem with should. Or the problem with attitude. Again, my idea here is please, we should not stop at this level. Means we need to move at the strong level of reflection. In other words, actions. What I suggest is that after the conference we sit down and reflect upon this conference and what should we do as teachers and as researchers to reflect upon this and to suggest ways to implement, maybe to identify the problems, to suggest ways and to implement and to come back to reflect upon them, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Benamki, for this ear-friendly presentation. I mean, I liked it. I enjoyed the way you delivered it. I congratulate you on your presentation. It was very interesting. Time for, the last presentation, but it's not the least. it's the, I am waiting for Mr. Idris Ben Yahya, to talk to us about learning, teaching, between executive. Yeah, Professor Wahia, I'm sorry for mispronouncing the name. So to speak to us about learning teaching between reflective teaching and classroom research, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm here just not to come up with new things, but I'm gonna just add to the narrative because several things have been mentioned, and what I try to do in my presentation is to share with you. I try to share certain kind of expertise because I've been teaching for 25 years. Second thing, I always adopt a motto, which is you seek for the what we call richness of meaning rather than the clarity of meaning. And we have been mentioning the idea of should and shouldn't. So my presentation is going to be about learning, teaching. So you're going to ask your question saying, why learning teaching? Do teachers also learn? It's only restricted to students and learners. Between classroom research and reflective teaching. Including classroom research in Moroccan training schools, teacher training schools, is something which is not common. I'm not saying that it's does not exist, but it's not common. And also the concept of reflective teaching is problematic because I think for a couple of days people have been reflecting, pondering, thinking, coming with reflections. As I said before, the rationale behind this presentation, first, I'm not saying it should, again, I should try to uncover some features of the effectiveness of reflective teaching through classroom research, because, as I said, classroom research is very important, it's overlooked. Very few teachers really get into this operation, which is a part and parcel of teaching. Teaching and learning are both interconnected. The second thing I'm going to talk is provide some tips. I'm not going to say should, but I'm going to provide some tips about liberating teachers from the contemporary linear approach to schooling, because most of the things are top-down instructions to approach. Now, learning actually does not stop whenever a training session finishes. It is where one's development as a teacher really starts. And here, when we want, I mean, professional development is a concept which is very elusive, it's mainly in education. And when we talk about professional development, we talk about an evolving process of self-enclosure and a kind of growth. When I say growth, I mean evolve, I mean growth and reflection. Now, in the same, however, as I said, the term of professional development is something which is elusive. Now, too many people, many educational, it conjures up images of in-service days plus workshops. To some, it is a kind of, it refers to a process wherein teachers work under supervision to gain tenure and to enhance their performance and their professional practice. But one of the definitions by Maggioli, it's a really thought-provoking definition. He said, and it is an ongoing process. It means like, I mean, more yesterday and today, many professors mentioned the idea of that professional development is not only one shot. It is a process that within which the teachers engage voluntarily. And this word here very important, the word voluntary, which means people, I mean, they are willing, they have a kind of willingness to get engaged and get involved in this kind of process to learn how best to adjust. And it's very important how to adjust their teaching to the learning needs of their students. And here, I thank you very much, sir, here in the front, for saying you have to think about to teach students the way you want to be taught. And I agree. And most of the time teachers, they throw the language and create situations for learning to take place. It's not you come with an agenda and you try to teach certain kind of things that students don't need. And here, I will move to something else. Within the large body of literature, I'm not trying to bring here a lot of theory, but I think theory stems from the class. Within the large body of literature, significant papers exist to demonstrate that in order to develop or improve teaching, one has to do the following, not has to do, but can, not has, because it calls the word should. Teachers need to reflect on what they do on a regular basis. It's not something that you do for a while, but regularly. It's on a lifelong process. Second, classroom research is one way of improving productivity. I mean, you reflect on your teaching, you reflect on your students, you reflect on the context, you reflect even on the educational system. It helps also improving various aspects of learning in the classroom. And the third part is it can answer questions and solve problems. Solve problems, I mean, answering questions and solving problems about teaching and learning involving a specific group, and here we go back to need analysis, I mean, the students' needs. A specific group of students in a particular setting. We cannot bring a theory from the West and try, this is why I really appreciate the work of one of the eminent scholars in the Arab world, Fuad Said, when he said the traveling of the theory. So we have to question and interrogate every single thing. And here, interrogating every sign we get. And the theory is not something that you have to implement in the class. I mean, maybe the teacher, as a researcher, is a kind of one who bridges the gap between theory and practice. Now, a teacher, as I said, as a researcher, takes the position of bridging the gap between theory and practice. In the same way, and there's a large body of literature, you can refer to it, and reflective teaching enables self-directed growth as a professional. It also facilitates the linking of both theory and practice. And it will really be a kind of, and I remember one student yesterday, a young student from Essex, she said that teachers don't care about us, just they want to implement things. But I think that we have to facilitate the link with theory. You cannot just bring a theory that works maybe in England, calling in England or in the US, and try to implement it in Morocco. So where is the Moroccan, teaching also is a culture. So when you teach, you have to take into consideration all the components, not only you take the theory and try to implement it. That's why sometimes it is a kind of distance between you, what you're teaching, and what the students really want. And this is where the class control and management disruptive behaviors start in the class. Now, I'm talking about the class, or if you think it's the same, I mean, teaching is everywhere the same. I mean, if you teach in high school, it's the same like you teaching at the university. I think if you have been trained in a very murky terrain at that time, you can, even when you move to the higher education, you can know how to deal with class control management and how to deal with the learners. Now, also it enables teachers to take a more active role. And here we talk about being active and being passive. And there is no one passive only if you want. There is nothing, no one, we cannot label people just you are active or passive, but if you want to do, if you want to be active, you go for it. If you want to reflect on your teaching, you can, but you cannot just implement every single thing is in the book or in the guiding instructions. It also enables, as I said, teachers to take a more active role in their professional development. And here, the subject, is the person. You are, it's something voluntary, as I said before, and the willingness to get involved in their professional development. Now, how people can ask, how can we really reach these reflective abilities? There are different, in the literature, there are different ways. There's no one single way how to become how to develop in teaching. There are several, and I think some of them, according to Sean and all, suggest 5 ways of to develop one's reflective abilities. But I think there are several. Everyone has got his own way of doing it. So I think this has been already mentioned. The use of dialogue journals, discussions not only in meetings and conferences like this, international conferences like TESOL or IETFL, and there are several places and contexts where people can really discuss. I agree with you. Sometimes when people start to discuss and then there is no implementation or recommendations. I think for the implementation, if there is a willingness within the group to carry on, this is what I say about action research or classroom research. And classroom research is not only conducted by one single person, but it's a community. And this is goes with the idea of Sahida's morning, yesterday she said cultural team, how to develop kind of cooperation between teachers, maybe either at the university level or in the general high school. Now, by asking this question, why classroom research by teachers? Why? One, by asking this question, one is raising a whole series of issues around the topics of professionalism, teacher behavior, the social control of teachers, and even of educational research. Research is not something like, I think there is one article by Roland Barthes when he said that from work to text. And a work is not, just you have research and you keep it in shelves, but it's something that you have to share and publish, and also share longitudinally. Not just to share it in an Arabic way, but to share it, even to send it even to other universities, not only keep it in shelves of the local library. Now, the role of teacher, this is very important. I said before that we have to liberate teachers from top-down approach in schooling. The role of teacher is to be autonomous in professional judgment. We cannot just, and here is what we call the notion of emancipation, liberating the teacher. This notion, it is a process involved in liberating teachers. When I say teachers, from the contemporary linear approach to schooling. This approach is mainly based on the assumption that instructions issued from the top are put into practice and at the appropriate levels and lower down the organizational structure, which is really a kind of thing. I've been teaching, but many times I've tried. I'm not taking my example, my experience as a perfect one, but I'm saying that many times I didn't really, we say textbook is the student's textbook. And sometimes there are some Moroccan textbooks at the secondary school. Really, it's like you are working, you are curving marble, marble, so it's difficult to deal with, so it's better to adopt other kind of things. And then, liberating teachers also to gain self-worth. Because sometimes teachers just they are implementing the syllabus. You cannot, I mean, at the university level, if you are teaching, for example, as the Professor Kruwet said yesterday, just bring in, I mean, three, okay. I mean, you usually give 5. You
Bonus, you have got a bonus.
Okay, thank you. He said that, I mean, you have to bring other material, especially for listening and speaking, teaching listening and speaking here, I mean, for S1. And many times it is not teaching of phonetics and transcription, but mainly, I mean, bringing text, I mean, bringing videos, bringing listening, authentic listening, in order to get students exposed to the native speaker pronunciation, accent, and the way of dealing with the course. Second thing, the third thing is the notion of emancipation is a kind of path to emancipation. Involves the reconceptualizing the curriculum development as curriculum research. And from the research, we get our development. This is not only develop a kind of curriculum, but it is research. I mean, it's from the teachers. I mean, there are teachers, I think recently, I mean, a week ago, I mean, teachers were summoned to have a kind of, to reflect on the Moroccan educational system and stuff. And I think I guess it was already concocted somewhere else and then brought to the top. That means it's a bottom-up participation. I don't think, but because all the headlines of these so-called charter, or how you view the Moroccan, what you can do, it has been already concocted somewhere. Okay. Then I believe in one thing, that another thing that's very important is, as the role of teacher, is linking research to the art of teaching. What I mean here, a teacher is like a gardener. A gardener deals, I mean, with plants differently, unlike a large-scale farmer who administers a kind of standardized treatment. In other words, teachers should be concerned with the individual progress rather than just the scoring and the score and submitting the scores. And now, I will here provide some of the benefits of classroom research. Most of them were mentioned yesterday, and I was thinking while I was listening to most of the presentations, I say, what I'm going to add to this? So I add to the narrative some reflection, some different way how to view reflective teaching and classroom research. To improve teacher practice, enhance, this is Saïda's, I call you again here, you talked yesterday about collegiality. Be closer after working on a group research project, be closer rather than be everyone working in his office, and getting new ways of reflecting on our teaching. So one of the tips, I would call them tips, to keep learning, teaching, because not only students will learn, I mean, the teachers also do. Never let your set ideas concrete. I mean, it's okay. To remain open to the possibility of being wrong. No one knows the truth about teaching. To always be questioning some of one's ideas. I mean, questioning is far better than just finding answers. To always question, to collect practical ideas and techniques one needs, but also to be questioned and challenging the authors. I mean, if you read about, for example, some methodology, and one lady, I think in the first panel, she said, are we supposed to stick to methodology, or we have to work on something else? I say, you have to question even the author, and questions are more important. Now, and also the last point is to know that nothing is fixed. And here I echo Professor, someone talked about change, the idea of change. In order to develop, we need to adopt the possibility of change. I think here I have to bring an Asian Chinese philosophy, which is Taoism. We say that Taoism says everything changing, interdependent, and constantly changing. So we are part of this world, and the change is natural. We don't need to struggle in order to change, but we have to be aware and be savvy about different things in the world capacity. So the last word is be here now, fully and utterly. Thank you.
We should thank you, Professor Lia, for your highly informative presentation. I especially liked your metaphor of the teacher as a gardener, not a farmer. I mean, that's very suggestive. Thank you very much. I would like you to invite the audience to, we're going to have something like 5 questions, priority given to students.
Program Applied Linguistics. I would like to thank the members of the conference for their presentations. My question will be addressed to Bermuki. In your study, you mentioned that many respondents were not satisfied or were not said that they are not responsible for professional development. And in the same vein, Dr. Hussain, in the previous panel, in his study, mentioned that 47% of the respondents were not satisfied. So here we should ask the question, who is responsible? And I think that the Ministry of Education did not do its job. So because the Ministry of Education, because the Ministry of Education, if you have a lot, you will find that there is no in-service training. So and you will find that there is no required or systematic teacher in-service training. So here my question: what is the administrative roadblocks that stifle the implementation of education reforms, particularly in regards to professional development? And thank you very much.
Thank you for your...
Address to Dr. Shawshan. You mentioned the need, that teachers need to get feedback from their students. It's something raised today by Ms. Saraji and Mr. Qasbi. This is something which in fact I do all the time. For the last 14 years, in the middle of the semester, at the end of the semester, I would ask my students to get a piece of paper and answer 3 questions. What do you like in my course? Number 2, what do you dislike in my course? Number 2, are there any suggestions you would like to make to improve the course? Now the problem is, in fact, I always get useful feedback from the students. Now some teachers claim that students are not in a good position to evaluate courses. To what extent would you agree or disagree with this claim? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insightful presentation. Okay, so my question will be addressed to Dr. Shawsh. You have claimed in your presentation that the rate of 64.81 claim that they read from the web. This leads me to ask the following question. Do the web sources, be it online or offline materials, invokes or promotes critical thinking and reflexive practices on the part of the students or on the part of the teachers? And thank you so much.
Thank you.
So my question is going to be for Mr. Bermuki. Okay? So you mentioned something about change. Okay? What can teachers change if they don't change their attitudes? You mentioned 2 very interesting and important tools that can allow teachers to move toward professional development, which are peer observation and allowing video recording in their classroom. So how can we change that? We mentioned attitude, we mentioned change. According to you, okay, I would like to know your personal view about changing innovative attitudes. Okay? Teachers only provide their trainees with the pedagogical aspect of teaching mechanism. How would you suggest they are able to learn about and apply the fundamental requirements of reflecting upon their classroom performance? And also, I have a remark concerning integrating technology into a classroom. I would like to say that it's a bit difficult integrating it in the undergrad, but in our master program, communication context, we have learned a lot from integrating technology into the classroom. And thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for your questions. Some questions. As for Mr. Khatib's questions about students' feedback, of course, it is part of assessment, it is part of feedback. It will always be beneficial. We cannot say that it will be the only parameter of self-assessment and self-evaluation. And at the same time, we cannot say that it is useless. They have a lot of things to say. I think part of reflective teaching is the student's feedback. It is an essential part. It's not all. It's not the only parameter or the main parameter. But it should be part of this kind of evaluation. That's for first question. This is regardless of what we say about all things that were said about students' feedback. Yes, as for the researcher here, the percentage is 69% of students declare that they need from the net. It will always be critical and beneficial. It will always be beneficial. I am not negative on this. Should be positive, both for the teacher and for the student. But here we are talking about reflective teaching, which means how to help students to get the best of this period and how to, for instance, how to distinguish between personal blocks. Instead of having the critical feedback of one's peer, why not give one's critical feedback? And there is here, you give me the opportunity to mention a point that I did not mention in my presentation, which has to do to help students to move from consumers, which means from mouse users, to producers, to keyboard users. This is my theory, keyboard and mouse, okay? As for the third question, I think we have here professors that can give a better answer because they were involved in training, in the training of teachers at the level of CPR, etc. I confess that I will not put my bare foot there, okay? Yes, last question. It's not a question, it was just a remark. It's not difficult to include technological, for instance, video presentations. I did the same thing in our master program, just a 10-minute sequence, and then it was wonderful for the feedback of everybody, etc. So we may have some difficulties, but we can come across. Yeah? Yes. It depends on levels. But we can also find a solution to this by e-learning platforms. Okay?
Thank you, Christian, for your answers. Floor is yours.
Thank you. First question about responsibility. And my question was like this. I think that professional development is teachers' own responsibility. Yes or no? And some teachers say no, which means that they are still at the stage of blaming others. It's true that there are obstacles for professional development that are not related to the teacher, but my point is this, to focus on teachers themselves, their attitudes. Because if we manage to change their attitudes, we can do something and stop blaming the education system or other. The second question is about teachers' attitudes, how to change teachers' attitudes. I think it's too early to answer this question, and I'm not able to do it. Because we need first understand what are these attitudes like, and determine what are factors that determine these attitudes, and then on the basis of those questions we can suggest ways to change or reinforce. It's not necessary to change, because if you have positive attitudes, we need to reinforce them. But if they are, I'm not going to say negative, we need to change them towards to be more willing and more motivated to developed. And thank you.
Thank you. Sorry?
Just an addition.
You have got an addition. You?
I have an addition of the nurse.
Okay, okay. Good.
Concerning the integration of technology in classroom. Depending on the situation, depending on the needs, maybe the needs of the learners and the teacher himself. The introduction of technology seems very pointed, very, if you want, absurd for both teachers and learners. It looks like the situation of a journalist who shows the microphone in order to get an interview. So whenever the interviewer sees the microphone, he is reluctant to answer. So a journalist should not abandon his job. He should find other solutions to interview the interview. The same thing happens with teachers training. So when we train teachers and we try to film their lesson demonstrations, they accept, they like. They like to be filmed and see their films after, to depict their mistakes. So depending on the learners, depending on the teachers, and the attitude here doesn't change negatively, it changes always positively. So the teacher should not abandon, should not be discouraged at this level. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Abouzi, for this elaboration. I think that we can still have not more than 3 questions, okay? Or we can go even to 5 questions, right?
Yes, and being an ethics student, I will be talking on behalf of my colleagues or my classmates who are in Fairleigh University. So I've been talking about reflective teaching and professional development. So my question is like somehow general. So I would like you all to, if you want to answer me. So my question is, isn't it of a paramount importance to account for students' learning styles in maybe as a bridge toward achieving or just talking about reflective teaching?
Okay, this is an open question. I need to... Anyone? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
William, you mentioned classroom research. So to what extent classroom research is to bridge the gap between theory and practice when it comes to professional development? And my second question is to the audience and the speakers. What we should do to bridge the gap between theory and practice when we speak about professional development? Thank you.
Okay, the previous panel. I heard him say that the change happens when you decide to teach your students in the way you would like to be taught. I don't think so. The change happens when you decide to teach your students in the way they would like to be taught. This is just a comment.
I don't really have any questions to direct to anyone, but I would like to push the reflection a bit deeper. We talk about professional development in a one-sided way, only from the perspective of teachers. And my message is to the students. You are concerned with that as well. And since Professor mentioned educational psychology, I guess that some research in social psychology would give us the real profile of the learner, and in this case we will probably make the equation even between the teaching and the learning, especially that Dr. Bahia mentioned that we need to adjust teaching to learning needs. Well, through experience I feel that our students don't have real needs apart from the mark and the degree, and that is a big defect of the Moroccan school. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor.
Leader of this conference, what Professor Bedr has said, that the first of making such change we have to look at the weaknesses or the instructor's weaknesses and the bad attitudes. So my question is, are there or what are the efficient ways through which we can diagnose or discover these weaknesses, or especially for those instructors who have never been at such pedagogical centers? My second question, that I don't want that all the time we are talking about the role of teachers, the role of professors. I don't want learners to be isolated in a such way. So here my question is, how could learners be efficient as an efficient or learners be efficient contributors in the teaching process? And thank you so much.
Your question is directed to whom?
To the whole panel.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mahabat.
About some ideas. First of all, I would like to start by attitudes. Well, I think we should overcome this concept of attitudes and move on towards practicing. Means that positiveness of attitudes or even negative should start by the teacher himself and also by the students themselves. Right, means who motivates who? The teacher or the students? I believe it's the students who motivates teachers, first of all. Second, speaking about updating skills and competencies, not about just evaluation. Evaluation should start by the self. So I believe about, because one of the teachers said we shouldn't, I think you said we shouldn't rely on intuition. Now I believe that intuition, the teacher intuition is important, but I rely on my intuition. Because when we rely on the feedback of students, they say some teachers, they never say you. They say some teachers teach like this. Or never students come to you at the beginning and say, we wish you could teach us this way. Right, so we start teaching, and also evaluation from the student depends on, you like the teacher, we like the subject. You don't like the teacher, we don't like the subject. Okay. So it's mutual. But don't you think that we have to move on and think about new things that, for example, the implementation of ICTs, how to implement them, the change. So what can we in fact do to change? Because that's true, people are difficult in people's attitudes. Don't change, but how can we change? So that's why I said we should overcome this idea of attitudes. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke.
We all know that in training centers, they teach them to apply theories and methods as they are. They're not being reflective in any way or another. So how are you supposed to be responsible and reflective to things you are supposedly learning by heart? And my second question is about the thing that Professor Khaloufi has mentioned about, and Professor Bouhia, about adapting those Western theories of Moroccan context. I think there should be, it's not actually a question as it is a remark, there should be a call for teachers, for researchers to write books about our Moroccan psychological thing. I mean, we need to study us, not adopt others and take them for granted. And thank you.
Thank you very much
for your question about reflective teaching. I would say that I go to the question about learning styles. I think I've already mentioned in one of my ideas that reflecting a teacher as a researcher is the one who tries to function as a kind of bridge between the theory and the practice. That is to say, I mean, the teacher, while conducting research, you are out teaching. You are not supposed to take the whole class as one entity. It's something that it's how to teach learning and teaching of a specific group in a specific group of students in a specific context. You cannot have a blanket judgment. I mean, I'm going to teach this or that. It depends on the needs of the students. And I agree with you, Professor, when you said that students don't share their needs or Professor too said it, but you can feel, and I agree with you, there is an intuition. I mean, through working within the professional field, I mean, teaching, you can feel your students, and you feel what they like and don't like. And I think when the students come into the director or come and say, I want to be in your class, what does it mean? I want to be in your class, I want you to be my teacher. And I think this is the moment, I mean, there is no recipe how to teach. I mean, it's an art that you nudge, you develop through your career. It's not something that can read in books. I mean, the way I deal with my teaching and the way I deal with activities in the class or in different classes, I mean, it's something not only what I want them to know, because I said there is one way. It's one way to teach is to teach students the way you were taught. I mean, easy to facilitate the. It's one way. It's not the ideal way to my teacher, Professor Lufake. Also, bridging the theory and practice, as I said. I mean, for me, the theory, of course, after a teacher, one of the prerequisites is to know some theories borrowed from the West. Meanwhile, I mean, you have to see to what extent the visibility of these methods. So you should not be enslaved by the idea of methods. Methods are not methods or theories. Theories, one day they are up and down. And the very important thing I insist on, as a lady over here mentioned, I mean, the problem of theory, to what extent this theory coined somewhere, or next door in Algeria, for example, is suitable, or something in Moroccan, in the north of Morocco. To what extent can we implement it in very outskirts of the city, for example, in Meknes, inside Meknes, downtown, and in the outskirts of the city? The students' needs are different. The students are different. I agree with you when I say we have to. Students also they have to motivate teachers. Sometimes when you come in the morning, I mean you want to teach, and you ask about the assignments. No one read the reading material, and I say, I'm sorry, I'm not here. So normally as a teacher, we all documents. I say, okay, I give you some readings, but you have to do that. I mean, you have to go through your readings. If you don't come, you don't prepare, you don't do your assignments, I mean, then I feel like kind of burned out. So I think when we don't talk about the students now, how we can develop in order to suit and how to make the profession flourish and not very ethical practices inside the class, inside the Moroccan school, inside the Moroccan, sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Professor.
The last one, please, the attitudes, as I agree, that attitudes is not something, it's difficult, it's hard to gauge, and we can feel, and sometimes, and here I use also the need as the construction, especially when you use taping. When you tape in the class, you tape a teacher, a professor, he's not going to perform the way he is going to perform, because we have to deconstruct the context. And at that time, I'm sorry, you say, I'm going to see my teaching, so there's something wrong, because you are not natural, you are not, there's something artificial. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Professor Bouhia, for... I'm sorry, I mean, I confused your name with Bouhia, a former colleague of mine. Nice dresser. Thank you very much, Professor Bouhia. I give the floor to Professor... yeah, in 1 minute, please, because we're going to close in a few minutes.
You have said, is it paramount to think that learning styles? Your question is it paramount that teachers should think about students' learning styles as a bridge towards reflective teaching? I think a reflective teacher should always bear in mind that there are the visual learners, the auditory learners, and the kinesthetic learners. And according to Vygotsky, the MKO, more knowledgeable Allah, there are some students who are good students, but they are waiting for the teacher to push them forward, to learn and to improve. It's part of this reflective teaching. Again, we go to Gardner's 7 intelligences, which are very important in taking or to take into consideration by a reflective teacher. Half answer to the lady there concerning who motivates who. Gibran Khalil said something very nice. A teacher who cannot motivate his students is like hammering on cold iron. So a good teacher is the one who accepts to be motivated by his learners. as well as he motivates his learners. Yesterday we talked about reflective teaching, but we also should think about reflective learning. Sometimes learners make the teacher conscious. Please, sir, your lesson today is very difficult to understand because I believe that the methodology is not appropriate. Would you please teach us next week in this way? In this way, the teacher can be motivated to change his methodology. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Professor Tayyip. And here I join Professor Aziz's remark upon the fact that students constitute the pillar, for teacher development, teacher professional development. There will be no teacher professional development if the students did not or do not urge the teacher to develop through questions, they should be demanded for the teacher to develop. Okay.
Sorry, I have to exert my power.
Just the announcement that you have, that we have. I'm excited to make two announcements. Leadership will be served at 1 p.m. Okay, on site. Second announcement is that we should close now. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm pleased to be the moderator of this honorable panel for basically two reasons. The first one is the profile of the speakers, and the second one is the nature of the subject. This afternoon is, especially this panel, is
professional development.
Well, so the aim of this paper is to present the results of the study that I conducted in order to try to conceptualize kind of a model for for a technology-related teacher professional development. The study was mostly or is, if you want, a follow-up of a previous quasi-experimental study that I conducted in 2011, and which was concerned with the effects of a training program on teachers' readiness to integrate technology in the classroom. One of the reasons that pushed me to go on working on this topic is a remark that was addressed to me by Professor Mellouk, who was then, during the Bates Conference in 2011, who was then the chair of the panel. And when I finished drawing the dark picture of the state of the training program and its inefficiency and inefficacy in preparing teachers, he told me, well, I think either the teachers or the trainers are lousy. And this did not stop ringing in my ear until I tried to find a way out of this problem. So what are the reasons that led to the failure of the program? So first of all, this is the outline. And here are a few. I don't want to go into details talking about what professional development is, since as we saw with Professor Larousse in the morning, it's just impossible to find a consensus in the literature on what is professional development. So I tried another way, that is to study the literature and try to get the overarching characteristics of what we could call effective professional development, and come up with these characteristics, and why not develop a model for professional development but geared to the integration of technology in the classroom. So professional development plays an important role in shaping teachers' use of ICT in the classroom. Teachers need to know why they do what they do, according to Hobart and Levy. Teacher preparation is the most important factor that could help teachers develop positive attitudes towards technology. And finally, the technological changes we face currently, compared with the changes of the past, require much more attention to staff development and support. However, as I said before, finding a consensus is difficult to find what is quality professional development, or specifically here I'm talking about technology-related teacher professional development. Henceforth, I will call it TTPD, due to its inherent subjectivity. So I got inspired from this quote, which by Lafky. Far more productive approach would be to identify specific core elements of professional development that contribute to effectiveness, and then describe how best to adapt these elements to specific contexts. So the problem, as I said, research evidence from the previous study I talked about, the quasi-experimental study, showed that teachers still lack the knowledge needed to be able to teach with technology successfully. The one-fits-all model of training also was one of the reasons of the failure of the program itself. So this model of TTPD programs is not of high quality, offering only, citing Borko, fragmented, intellectually superficial seminars. The lack of subject-specific focus in the program also is another issue. And the consequence, as I said, the program failed. The purpose of the study is, if you want, twofold. First of all, I want to examine the characteristics of effective technology-related teacher professional development activities from the literature, and to develop a model for TTPD that would maximize the effects of pre-service and in-service teachers' technology integration training programs, and that would help sustain teacher learning over time. So the central question is shown over there. And to address this central question, I developed two research questions. What are the characteristics in recent literature of TTPD activities for the integration of instructional technology into teaching practices? And the second research question, what are the characteristics of a model for effective TTPD activities? The review of the literature, I will go very briefly through that. So I tried to examine the existing models from the literature, and I noticed that there are two eras, if you want, of teacher or technology-related teacher professional development models. Pre-TPAC and post-TPAC. So the TPAC made a very considerable change in the perception of what technology-related teacher professional development is. So about 2 decades ago, educationalists and teacher educators started thinking about designing teacher development programs to facilitate the transition of schools to technology integration. So the early models include, just examples, the T4 development model, the technology for learning, Apple Classroom of Tomorrow, the exemplary teacher program, and Intel Teach program. This is the program that inspired Genie, and it was even in collaboration with Intel. So TPAC. So I'm going to talk about the paradigm shift that happened in the view to teacher professional development for technology. Until we share some theoretical vision of this topic, we will never glimpse the larger picture that could give our everyday classroom efforts, direction, and meaning. So TPAC, very briefly, is this. The TPAC postulates that there are 3 core knowledges that interfere to make up the competencies of a teacher, of a technology competent teacher. The 3 bodies of knowledge are technological knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and content knowledge. And the intersection of these 3 bodies of knowledge, they create 4 other new bodies of knowledge, which are technological pedagogical knowledge, content pedagogical knowledge, technological content knowledge, and the most important is the central one, which is the TPACK, the TPAC, or the technological pedagogical content knowledge. The post-TPAC models include Lee's 5-stage model, Angeli and Valentis ICT TPAC, and Jiang and Chen's transformative model, and finally Fick and Jaipal's TPAC in practice. The qualitative study used content analysis in order to detect, if you want, the overarching, as I said, the overarching characteristics of what professional technology-related teacher professional development is, and also to build up or to try to develop this model. A query was conducted, 4 articles published within the past 8 years, that is from 2006 to today, examining TTPD. This time span was dictated by the TPAC itself, which started being in vogue in 2006. The definitive pool of research papers meeting the criteria consisted of 39 articles. The methodological procedure consisted in, number 1, analyzing the content of each document in terms of its categories and its emerging status, and number 2, using the emerging categories to conceptualize a model for TTPD that would hopefully include as many characteristics of success as possible. The findings of the study, so the results of the analysis showed that 13 out of 39 studies talked about the effect of TPAC on teachers' readiness to integrate technology. By the way, not only 13 studies talked about TPAC, almost 30 studies examined programs using TPAC as a framework, but only 13 had research questions related to the effect of TPAC on teachers' readiness. Continuous professional development, or CPD, was tackled by 10 articles and studies. Constructivist methodology of preparing teachers, I'm talking about the using the constructivist methodology with teachers, not with students, and using a cohort-based individualized professional development in contrast with, as I said, the traditional methodology which used the the one-size-fits-all model. So the total of the articles was 39 articles. So here are lists of the articles with, sorry for the, okay, so on the right, on the left, sorry, we have the list of authors and the publications. By the way, the publications I chose either were related to or have had as main theme or main topic teacher development, teacher training, or technology integration. And the main findings related to the themes I talked about, the emerging themes from the study. Studies on continuous professional development, here is the list. And if you want the full list of references, I can provide it to you after, and even the articles if you are interested in. Okay, then the list of articles that deal with the methodology used to teach, to train or to prepare teachers. And finally, a list of the studies, sorry. Okay, the studies that deal with the cohort-based individualized training. The model. Based on these, I conceptualized a kind of model, if you want. So the model is built on 2 core elements. First of all, TPAC as the framework for building the content of the courses. And of course, the ultimate goal of any training or whatever is students' achievement, as you can see. So starting from TPAC at the beginning, as the heart, as I said, as the heart of the model, and with the ultimate goal being student achievement. The other factors of success, if you want, of the professional development could be probably adopting a constructivist methodology, ensuring the sustainability and continuity of the training, and it should be done in the form of cohorts or one-on-one training or something like this, but not the one-size-fits-all. So effective TTPD should move away from the traditional sit-and-get workshops and emphasize activities that are job-embedded, including mentoring, action research, as mentioned in many papers before, assessment, reflection, feedback, collaborative planning, and collegial observation. TTPD should change teachers' knowledge, beliefs, attitudes, and behavior, because these correlate with classroom practices and thereby influencing students' learning. And we must tie, according to Crichton, we must tie the use of technology to student achievement and all content areas. We must get beyond thinking of technology as hardware and software. Technology must be monitored and assessed with the same importance as the curriculum, and this of course provides feedback to teachers, which allows them to self-assess their needs with written documentation of their observed performance. Schools must also make an effort to shift from the typical PD method of the single focus or one-shot workshop to a model that supports adult learning theory and also constructivist theory. So all in all, the TTPD designs should incorporate 7 characteristics of effective TTPD distilled, as I said, from the literature. Number 1, they should put students' achievement as the ultimate goal. Number 2, it should relate, or they should relate to the teacher's content area, and they should be collaborative. They should allow for effective engagement with the content. They should also be tailored to different levels of teachers' knowledge and skills and interest, and they should be sustained. And finally, they should include follow-up activities. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Fatmi, for this illuminating presentation. I'd like you please to record your notes if you have any questions to Professor Fatmi for discussion later. And now I give the floor to Professor Belfaqir, who is going to talk to us about mobile learning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The choice of my topic this afternoon, it might sound like a too optimistic choice. Is mobile learning just the latest fad? We've been discussing the concept of introducing or inserting or whatever. You call this, Professor Bouziane, the invisibility stuff concerning technology in education. We've not yet reached that very specific stage. But I would like to sound like too optimistic this afternoon and speak about mobile learning and how we can integrate it into our system, though it's very hard to be introduced now. So I'm sure if I ask you about your reactions concerning this picture, students, what do you do with your mobile phones? This is one thing we could do, and this is the different age. Yes, we quite use it in sheets, but this is the unhealthy way of using it in class. But you could use it for different purposes. One of them is to emit voice and video calls. You can use it to check your emails, to text. You can use it to upload, download stuff. You can use it to live in a virtual world and to be perceived as beings in the virtual world. So the mobile is a Swiss Army knife, a functionality, a device that fits in every pocket or purse. We agree about that. Can we use it to learn? Do you use it to learn? So which means that I'm not I thought I was overconfident about the present and the future, which means that you also are too optimistic. The trend toward, well, I'm going to speak about mobile learning. Well, of course I will be introducing it, I will be speaking about its advantages, disadvantages, and things related to mobile learning, well, in a sketchy way. But I will take the side of the learner. I will speak about mobile learning mostly from the perspective of learners, whom I would be calling millennials, or digital natives as Professor Bouziane once again referred to them. It's Prensky 2001. You are called digital natives because you are born in technology and with technology and through technology. So the trend towards most young learners, millennials, using smartphones and iPads rather than desktop computers reflects their preference toward a more portable learning environment. Traditional approaches to teaching do not address most of the values, needs, and learning preferences of these students. So to what extent is mobile learning going to address these preferences? The preference mostly of learning in a portable learning environment. So the outline will run as follows. The definition is amassed, some of the pros and cons, advantages, disadvantages, and some of the challenges. The millennial generation, who are you? I will be speaking about you, defining you, your attributes, characteristics, your preferences, your inclinations. It's not my point of view, but I will be there too because I've been living with you for many years, so I can speak about you. How does mobile learning fit millennials? Well, there I will be comparing your preferences with the availabilities in mobile learning. So, mobile learning, if I ask you to define mobile learning, we say mobile learning is learning while you are mobile, either physically or using a device. And these are the two types, the two phases of mobile learning. So in the first one, there was a focus on the mobility of the learner. In the second one, there was a focus on the mobility of the device. Look at the definition in which the mobility of the learner is stressed. Mobile learning takes learners out of the classroom while keeping them connected to the information they need at all times, which means when you are outside, you're learning. When you are in a museum, you're learning. Any field trip is a classroom for you. So you're learning not in a classroom, not in the brick and mortar classroom, but you're learning outside of the classroom. The second phase is where the device is the main important, the mobility of the device is the most important element. The term mobile learning or M-learning refers to the use of mobile and handheld devices such as PDAs, mobile phones, laptops, and tablet PCs in teaching learning. So here is the device which is mobile. It's a virtual mobility, where the first one is more physical mobility. And I have found a more comprehensive definition, one that combines both types of mobility. The virtual and the physical was proposed by Omar in around 2005. Any sort of learning that happens when the learner is not at a fixed, predetermined location, learning that happens when the learner takes advantage of the learning opportunities offered by mobile technology. So here, both facets are included, being mobile or being physically mobile or being virtually mobile. Some of the pros, I won't go into details about some of it, but most of them, but one of them, the first one, is the propagation of mobile technology. So mobile devices today are more portable, more sophisticated, easy to learn, easy to use. They are endowed with a number of technological appliances and applications that you can use to perform old tasks and others that can be used to perform new ones. And a multiplicity of communication is also allowed through these mobile devices. And of course, the famous one, anytime, anywhere connection. With the new learning, the creation of a new culture. Since users consider handheld devices as more personal, they will consider mobile learning as being personal learning. And mobile learning also increases the collaboration among members of the learning community. Some of the participants has already introduced the idea of learning community, and he spoke about them as being different members with a common objective and working for the attainment of that common objective. So those people can collaborate easily with the mobile device. Flexible and timely access to up-to-date learning resources, that's also because of the connection anytime, anywhere. And the extended non-academic academic and para-academic assistance. This, once again, is something that's available with mobile learning more than in the face-to-face or on-campus learning. Another advantage of mobile learning is that education, it provides education for all. Perhaps that's a program which is a UN program, and these are things I have taken from Muhammad Ali 2009. He said that mobile learning is supposed to raise this learner's self-esteem, and it makes them learn and focus for a longer period of time because they choose their most learnable time. These are the words of Muhammad Ali. Their most learnable time is that time in which they are most alert. Perhaps they're most alert was the night, not in the morning, not in class time. Mobile learning caters for different learning styles. Of course, the teacher is supposed to be aware of the differences of learning styles. Of course, he can't do it every time he is supposed to teach a new group, which means that he has to make available every learning material in different formats. Text, audio, and video to cater for different learning styles. It empowers and engages learners, particularly those in dispersed communities, and it liberates learners with physical and mental disabilities. It is also supposed to re-engage lost youth. What he called lost youth is generally school dropouts. Those people who have lost confidence in the educational system can be brought back, can be re-engaged with mobile learning. And it educates the displaced communities, those who have been displaced due to natural and or human disasters, wars for instance. Moving to some of the cons. Related to the device, the small size of the device is a problem. It's small, it could be stolen. You can lose it easily. And it's small, its screen is going to be too small for the placement of educational material. Battery life, you need to recharge and replace the battery every now and then. And its processing power is not as important when compared to the desktop and the laptop computers. And of course, relatively, it's still costly. The new culture which is created as a result of the new learning is also sometimes an obstacle. Given the variety I have just told you, the teacher is supposed to create learning material in different formats designed for different learning styles. So that's redundancy in design, in course design. And the teacher is supposed to be an end moderator, which means he's supposed to moderate through the mobile device. So he's supposed to have an end maturity. What our professor Bouzier called digital proficiency, perhaps, I'm generally calling it just digital efficiency. He's supposed to have some efficiency with the skills in digital technology. And the mobile phone may be perceived as an alienating medium. I would say the more you are attached to your mobile phone, the more detached you are from the reality. And the importance of mobile phones in shifting power dynamics between adults and young people, of course, because they have the power of expertise. They can manipulate their mobile phone, their mobile device better than their parents. So there is a shift in that type of power. Challenges. Some of the challenges of mobile learning, there are many. One of them is, that one is it's shared among any e-learning programs in the e-learning system. Providing a safe online learning environment, so both teachers and learners have to agree on the moment etiquette. So, as you know, identities, relationships, and interactions are redefined in the virtual world. So we have to agree on certain prerequisites. And mobile technologies require a redefinition of what is public, private, and intimate. Borderlines sometimes are hazy, are not that clear in the minds of both teachers and learners. Once again, the student himself sometimes becomes like a commodity, like an object. So that's what is called the commodification of users and their content. That's something also which is common in the internet. The content that is provided or generated by the user sometimes might be sold, might be used by market researchers, maybe, might be used by businesses, might be used, and this is unhealthy use of information in the online world. Affective and motivational factors. That's what dynamic obsolescence. what Davies calls dynamic obsolescence. It's the real challenge that is created by the problem of hardware and software. Sometimes when you speak about our children, you say they are motivated with technology. It's technology that motivates them. But you're motivated with the technology, you just learn it and you have other novelties in the field. So it's very difficult to sustain the motivation of our students with the transient nature or ephemeral nature of technology. And Davies said that you could maintain that intrinsic motivation by the provision of challenge and complexity as well as curiosity in the design and choice of activities and tasks that allow for agency by the user. So he's telling us that it's the job of the teacher to create that motivation or to insist on maintaining that motivation for a longer period of time. Now I'm going to speak about the second, let's say, facet of my paper, which is millennials. Do you know what do we mean by millennials? Millennials are most of you here are millennials. Millennials, digital natives, Generation Y, Yers, you've got many names. Much has been written about the prowess of the millennial generation. These digital natives have been attributed with the ability to process information, make decisions, multitask, and learn new technologies better, I insist on that, better than any generation that has come before. Which means that you've got qualifications, characteristics, and attributes that are different than the ones we have. I say we because I'm born before.
Me too.
It's clear before. It's before 1990. No, I acknowledge. Computers are not technology. For them, they don't think that computers are technology. They don't think that their mobile is technology. It's part of their lives. And millennials are by nature fast thinkers. That's why the traditional classroom, and that's something also that has been already mentioned by some of the participants, the traditional classroom is so unsuccessful for most of them. It's boring for them. And the millennials, look, this is a scientific research, it's not mine. These are things that have been done by pure scientists, hard scientists. So millennials MRIs have shown that these people, millennials, have greater cerebral capacity through increased ganglia and folds of their brains. And these MRIs have also shown a very different form of processing using both hemispheres. Generally, we use one at a time, and one for certain special things. But you can use them both and simultaneously. So that's why they think in a non-linear way. That's why they can work in high-stress environments and prefer hands-on activities, which means that you get bored very easily with us, non-millennial teachers. This change in brain structure profoundly alters the way these students brain, learn, think, read, socialize, and interpret information, thus creating a new generation of innovative, plugged-in, multitasking students. Did you know that? Millennials expect to be engaged in their learning. They do not do well when they are passive. For them, doing is more important than knowing. And their motto is, change is given, and stability is unnatural, not like the traditional teacher. They like change. Learning more closely resembles Nintendo than logic. Nintendo symbolizes a trial and error approach to solving problems. Losing is the fastest way to mastering a game. They don't care about rules, by the way. Even when you tell them the rule is, the directions are, they don't care about them. They need to discover them by themselves. And in some, they have little aversion to failure. They don't care. They are not worried about failure, as long as they learn from that failure. Now, here, it's personal. What I'm going to do here is like trying to find what you have, millennials as characteristics, and trying to find the equivalent or the affordance in mobile learning. So can you please just take this, and if ever you have any kind of criticism, I'm ready to take it towards the end. Millennials are wild with technology. They seem as though they are surgically attached to their mobiles or smartphones. And mobile learning, the same handheld connected tools, enable learners to access existing educational solutions and to capture and share knowledge in return, which means that in mobile learning, the mobile device is a must. Millennials love navigating the web. Mobile learning also is based on a vast amount of existing educational material. Sometimes it's for free, sometimes it's developed or created or designed by the teacher himself or herself. Millennials have a strong appetite for options because they have grown up or have been brought up in a menu-driven environment, and the teacher is only one option, which means they have other options all the time. The teacher becomes more important in mobile learning as a guide to assimilation and organization of information than a traditional disseminator of information, so there is no sage on the stage. Millennials prefer to communicate via email, texting, and other networking, social networking. They are agile and very responsive. And communication in mobile technology is, of course, technologically mediated. The millennials are avid users of the latest Web 2.0. They are Web 2.0 content creators, not merely content consumers. And that's also something which is available in mobile learning. There is ambient learning, in which the learner can use multimedia affordances to increase their learning and teaching for the teacher. Teamwork is high in their agenda. Those people, millennials, like collaboration. And collaboration is a must in mobile learning. Millennials hate working with schedule. They don't like to be tight or restricted with a schedule, timetable. And flexibility is a must, is one of the characteristics of mobile learning. Millennials want to control their learning. And mobile learning offers customized or personalized learning experiences. Millennials prefer a relaxed and informal approach to learning. They like to learn at their pace, in their context, in their chosen context, and in their way. They are 24/7 on their smartphones. Mobile learning is also called lifelong learning, informal learning. Mobile devices can enhance, transform, and extend learning beyond the brick-and-mortar classrooms. Millennials are relationship-driven. They prefer paternalistic teachers. They are all the time in constant search for acknowledgement, praise, support, moral support from their teachers. And the teacher in mobile learning becomes a moderator, a facilitator, and a mentor. Millennials are not motivated by material incentives. Most of the time they are not motivated by grades. They learn more from failure and want to find the best blend of an enjoyable life with a fulfilling learning environment. And mobile learning proposes a supportive environment in which technology, hardware and software, the teacher itself, and other members of the learning community could also be a source of support and motivators to the learner. And to conclude, universities have to wake up to the fact that millennials are more likely to succeed if the avenues with which they are familiar, millennials are familiar, are exploited for their academic development. And the success of current and future studies relies on this ability of the classroom to adjust to this new breed of learners. It is not that teachers need to abdicate their roles as leaders or authority figures or as imparters of knowledge, or to abandon traditional lecture and other tried and true instruction strategies. Rather, in addition to their traditional roles, teachers must take on a very important new role as guide or a mentor. So just to end, I would like to tell you that the traditional teacher is generally equated to a manager. I've heard one of the participants equating or comparing the teacher to a manager. That's the traditional version of teaching. A teacher being a manager won't work in a mobile context where the teacher is supposed to be a real leader. And he has to inspire his followers all the time. He has to support them, not materially, supporting them more morally and psychologically all the time. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Professor Abdelfaqih. Your presentation has been so captivating that I forgot about the time. But anyway, my question, although it's not time for questions, is are we people of my generation capable of coping with this mobile learning. Right, the next speaker is Professor Jamei, and in the same vein of thought, incorporating technology to higher education. Professor Jamei is from the School of Humanities of Meknes, and he's going to talk about ICT in higher education. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much for everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must say, I'm rather surprised and gladly surprised, because the intervention of both my colleagues, Silfatmi and Sada Al-Faqir, about ICT, the role and the definitions and all that, will make my life much easier. So what I will be talking about is the use of ICT in Moroccan higher education. I like to relate it to the context in reality rather than much of the theory. So a quick definition, I will go through it quickly because lots have been said about that, so no need to repeat myself. So I will be talking about ICT in 21st century as a needed skill, the impact on higher education, and the share of that in the Moroccan initiative. So this is really ICT. Anything that is electronic, which deals with information, and which deals with communication. You have all sorts of things. From games to video, radio, anything. For some reason, I get the wrong impression probably that ICT is something that is very modern. It is not. Australia has been using a radio to teach mainly at the primary education, where students stay at home, the teacher stays at home, and they communicate via radio. They use military radio, so no need, because of the space, the huge space of Australia. Saudi Arabia used ICT, they used television as a closed circuit television where females and males are separate, and because of lack of female teachers, the females were gathered separately and the males teach them via circuit TV. And that is a form of ICT regardless of the reason behind it. Still it is. This chart is taken from a UNESCO study, the Bangkok office, and it illustrates that. So we have learning and innovation skills, life and career skills, core subjects, 21st century themes, information, media and technology skills. All these skills are for students as well as professionals. It is for professional development. So ICT must play a role not only in professional development, but also in student learning and student teaching. So those points we looked at before, we go through them one by one. Learning and innovation skills, so whether these are professionals or students, need to be prepared to increasingly complex life and work environments in 21st century. Life is not going to get any easier. It is only going to get more and more complex. And we need to be prepared for that. Otherwise, the train will not wait. We will be left behind. Decades ago, a literate person was the one who couldn't read and write. Today, a literate person probably could be one who couldn't use a mobile phone just to make a call, even if they can read and write. So, the illiteracy and literacy, the meaning has changed, and it changes with the change of life or with the complexity of life. So we need to keep up with that. Creativity and innovation, critical thinking It's no longer good to recite a poem by whoever on whatever subject and gets 19 out of 20. That is useless. I don't remember what I learned by heart to become a doctor. I really don't. So that was useless. It was waste of time. Yes, it was a good exercise in critical thinking, but it could have, my time could have been used better. This is why I'm saying this, because we need to make a shift from largely a 19th century educational system based on a classroom and a teacher, chalk or whatever ends today, and today's ICT. Communication is key. We need to communicate, both professionals, students, teachers. We need to communicate because that's, at the end of the day, we are all citizens that need to communicate with each other to go forward for the sake of collaboration. The skills we need to learn are those for life. And that's what I tell my students. I tell them that they have two skills that they must retain from the PA. One is terminology, how they use their terminology, and the other one is methodology. And communication, productivity, cross-cultural skills, self-direction, innovation, all these are skills which have a certain methodological thinking or logic behind them that takes us for life. There's information, media, and technology skills. This is the world. This is the world we live in. Today, even something as simple as a satellite dish or desktop, or box needs programming, needs a certain literacy, certain information, certain technological grasp to be able to watch Al Jazeera. Something as simple as that. To put cartoons for your brothers, little brothers and sisters or kids. Something as simple as that. We think of it as stupid, but it's not. That's life. That's today's life. Therefore, that leads us to the third point, which is ICT. ICT is always there. Digital literacy, this is what I said earlier, the e-literacy, how to read a screen, how to use the multimedia, ICT again, information literacy. All these are skills we definitely must have. No choice about it. So this is a chart again from the same source, UNESCO Bangkok office. Use of ICT tools to create and share information, locate and evaluate information, making multimedia presentations, and you can go on. The impact of ICT in higher education. Brings positive change in social organization of the classroom, achieves higher professionals and students-centric focus on delivery. From my experience, I find this very, very hard to grasp the concentration of my students, but I'm sure if I had a clip from YouTube, I don't have to make it myself. I can always borrow it from the net, as long as I acknowledge whose source is that. So if I use a clip or I use something else which is visual, based on the idea that a picture is worth more than 1,000 words, you will get the attention of students. And here I subscribe to your view that this generation needs more. Enough with 19th century education in 21st century world. It enhances teaching and learning through dynamic, interactive, and engaging contact. Develops, enriches, and accelerates. This is important, it's the acceleration. Today, we teach, roughly speaking, 8 weeks, the 4 weeks goes between exams, strikes, and so on, how do we make good use of those 8 weeks? It's a question. It's a shame we are building generations that will lead the country at 8 weeks' notice. It's beyond belief. So we need to be creative. We need to find new solutions. It also relates the classroom experience to work experience. Provide opportunities for connection between classroom and larger world. One example I can give here is when I ask my students to write when they present their drafts, their paper drafts, especially the S6, I always ask them to bring it typed or word processed. It's not that I want to burden them with those few dirhams they use at the CBER. No, that's not the point. The point that they must use a computer because they are going to a certain administration where they must be able to use a computer at a minimum level, which is word processing. That is also for professionals. I know professionals who really cannot use a computer. I think they should either learn or take earlier retirement, but it's not for me to say that. I always put, in this case, I always put professionals and students together because they are tight, they are linked. Because those professionals are students, in fact, when it comes to ICT, because they need to keep up, they need to learn, they need to move on. What is learned when we use an ICT system, regardless of its nature, we always ask, as part of the evaluation, what is it learned and how much, how it is learned, when it is learned, from whom it is learned, who is learning what, at what cost. The cost is always an issue. I don't believe the cost is an issue, but the powers to be, or the powers in being, make it an issue. So conventional teaching emphasizes on content. I would use the Arabic expression, بضاعة عرضت إلينا, in order to get that degree at the end of the day, which is really a shame. People waste 3 years of their life, that's minimum, at something which is more or less irrelevant. That's a personal point of view, by the way. I'm not forcing it on anyone. Learning activities are designed to consolidate and rehearse the content. It's always the content. Contemporary settings encourage curricula that promote contemporary competency and performance. Curricula are now emphasizing capabilities. So, as long as students and professionals can use something in all conditions, they are successful. But when you limit them to something that they must know, once you give them a second task, they are unable to do it because they are framed or molded in one concept, in the old concept. They are more concerned with how information will be used than with what the information is. How is it learned? Competency and performance-based curricula, access to a variety of information sources, access to a variety of information forms and types, professional students-centered learning, settings-based information, access and inquiry. All these make the intellect or challenges the intellect. Rather than being passive, students and professionals become active. Learning environments centered on problem-centered and inquiry-based activities, authentic settings and examples. Teachers as mentors rather than context experts. I mean, within the Moroccan University, lots of you know, I'm sure, that we don't mostly teach what we are experts at. We just teach what is needed to be taught. So if that is the case, we rather change ourselves and adapt to a certain new reality. And ICT will help us. Because if I'm not an expert in anthropology, and you give me a data show in a classroom, I can always get a clip from YouTube which deals with anthropology, and my students will be satisfied instead of looking there like a damn fool, because the systems requires me to teach something I'm not qualified to teach. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip a lot because you've seen this before. So this is the ICT main content focus. So you have core technology, learning how to use ICT, complementary technology, and learning via ICT. So you have the learners and the teaching with through ICT. This is again from the Bangkok office. Now, all this introduction to bring us to the Moroccan National Initiative. Article 10 of National Charter of Education and Training of 1999 is focused on the integration of ICT in education. It sounds really good on paper. On reality, yeah, there is an article about it. What the argument about it, I don't know. INGES is a program that sells computers to postgraduate students. Where are the undergraduates? We need to cover the lot, not just the few. So that's about INGES. I think you already know it. INGES is part of the... There is another program which is called Digital Morocco 2013. Marwan project, which is a network of universities. And where is that network? I'm teaching here and I don't see one. CFM, and you have all these projects. CAT, which one of our colleagues talked about earlier this morning concerning teacher training. It is run by USAID. All these programs. Now I come to Moulay Ismail University. The purpose of Moulay Ismail University is not to criticize the university at all. The university is just an example, and it is exactly the same as all Moroccan universities. They all share the same symptoms, they all have the same problems. And I'm talking about state universities, excluding Al-Akhawain and any other privates. So the faculty, according to the administration, has 13,896 students. Those students have 180 computers in 6 classrooms. And they have 10 overhead projections or data shows. Hardly any access to the internet for students, and hardly any courses or teaching websites by the university. The conclusions from these numbers: 77.2 students per computer. If you keep that computer running 24 hours a day and you keep a teacher there 24 hours a day, will not serve the students at all. So, the overhead projections mostly are in the administration for meetings and all those funny stuff, and in the postgraduate studies programs. The undergrads have, I think, 1 or 2 they have to fight over. And this is exactly in all universities, not just Moulay Ismail. So it's not a criticism of Moulay Ismail, it's a criticism of the whole system altogether. This is an example of a web page within Moulay Ismail University for students. So students go to this Facebook page, they press a link and they download the material they need. This Facebook page, I looked at different systems, Moodle and NetNet or whatever they call, and they need to access and control students and all that. We have no follow-up for students because of the numbers. We have no control for students because of the numbers. So this is one of the ways to do it. All you do is you put the material for students, messages for students, and you go there. No, conclude, and then yes. Yes. Sorry. The new filière, for example, in the English department, talks about computer-assisted translation. Where are the computers? Where is instructors? Where are the software? And yet we have to teach them this. This is a joke. It's honest. It's a joke. So that's no comment. Thank you very much. Thanks to you.
I will continue on your joke, as you can see. Professor Jamil, I just tell you that you don't see these things because they are virtual. Yes. That's why you don't see them. Next speaker is Professor Yahu from Shuaib Tokheli University, and he's going to talk about web-based platforms in higher education. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So after this pessimistic presentation, we'll finish this panel with, I hope, optimistic one. So the title of my presentation is an empirical assessment of students' acceptance of a web-based learning platform. Now, this presentation, I hope, assume that it's part of, it fits the theme of this conference, reflective teaching. And I hope it's part of my reflective teaching on the use of web-based or e-learning. I've been using e-learning to teach some courses like grammar, phonetics and phonology, research methods, and ICT. So here is the this is the outline of my presentation. I'll start with the research background, rationale, aims of the study, the research model and hypotheses, research and dying note on methodology and the results, and finally the discussion and applications. Now, a recent trend, of course, has been in Moroccan higher education to try to introduce web-based learning systems. Although this is, sometimes we have individual efforts, sometimes we have, institutions that are trying to integrate these systems into education. Although there has been this effort, we have very little. The offer is not much substantial when it comes to either partial, blended, or fully online e-learning. So this, of course, this is due to barriers and difficulties which are not part of my study today. Now, the success of any e-learning system will depend on the student. If the student does not use this web-based system, so all the efforts is for nothing. My experience with e-learning is that at the very beginning, the initial sessions, I noticed some reluctance of students. Why? It's very, some of the students showed this reluctance. So to understand this kind of reluctance motivated this study, or one of the motivations of the study. Another motivation is that we find very little research that is model-based and empirical to understand the factors that affect students' acceptance or rejection of web-based learning systems. So, I have three aims or objectives for this study. First, to investigate the determinants that would explain the acceptance of Moodle by Moroccan students at El Jadida and trying to determine the attitudes and perceptions of students towards Moodle in a blended context, because I've been using this in a blended context. And finally, to suggest a structural model to explain the acceptance and attitudes of Moroccan students at El Jadida. Now, this structural model is based on the technology acceptance model, which I think you know, that has been developed by Davies and colleagues to try to explain users. I mean, when I say users, it doesn't mean students. It has been used, it has been proposed and suggested to explain any user acceptance of information technology. And there has been much evidence to support this model, which can be considered as a robust model to predict user use of technology. So here is a little bit, you know, a few words about this model. Pointer doesn't work. I hit you. Okay, so what is in the two constructs that are very important in the model is perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use are considered two factors that are very important in explaining attitude toward the use of any information system. And of course, there are other external variables that should be taken into consideration. The technology acceptance model has been used in other domains, in other areas, apart from, because it has been suggested to explain online shopping and other uses of technology. And of course, it has also been extended to predict the use of technology in learning. So very quickly, I'm going to try to define these constructs because they are very important. So perceived usefulness is the degree to which a person believes that a particular system would enhance his or her job performance. And perceived ease of use is the degree to which a person believes that using a particular system would be free of effort. Finally, attitude could be considered as the positive or negative feelings you have about a particular system. Now, here is the picture of the model that I'm trying to suggest, and I have 13 hypotheses that I try to, validate. The first three ones, H1, H2, and H3, has to do with computer self-efficacy. Computer self-efficacy is defined as your attitude, your belief that you are confident about using a system. So we, with H1, hypothesis 1, we postulate that computer self-efficacy would have a positive effect on perceived usefulness. And computer self-efficacy would have a positive effect on perceived ease of use. And again, computer self-efficacy will affect attitude. Now, the next hypothesis, hypothesis 4, 5, 6, and 7, try to see the impact of perceived ease of use on the variables of attitude, intention to use, and frequency of use. And next, with hypothesis 11 and 12, we're going to focus on attitude and see whether it will impact intention to use and frequency of use. And finally, the last hypothesis is intention to use affected, is frequency of use affected by intention to use. Now, the survey instrument consisted of 23 items. This questionnaire has already been validated, so it has been adapted from previous research and has been refined and adapted to this study. The constructs that we are using have been measured on a 5-point Likert scale, ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And finally, the last variable, frequency of use, values range from 1, never, to every day. These are now P1, PU1, PU2. These are the items on the indicators belonging to the construct perceived usefulness, and this is part of the questionnaire. So I go very quickly because I think the sample consisted of 47 students from the Department of English. This is a purposive sample. These are the students I have in the class, so kind of having a random sampling. These students attended a semester 6 course entitled Advanced Research Methods in a Blended Learning Environment. And they attended this course which I designed. The questionnaire was handed out in one of the classes 2 months and a half into the program. Now, SPSS was used for questionnaire data coding. The statistical data analysis used was the partial least square method, and that is called the path modeling. It's very suitable, especially for sample size. I have 47 students is really a very small sample size. I'll start with just simple descriptive statistics, that is the mean and the standard deviation. So in general, as you can see, students have very positive attitudes towards using Moodle, and they intended to use Moodle, and also they think that Moodle is easy to use and very useful for their learning. I'll say a few words about the analysis of reliability. These indicators of reliability and validity are very important to say that the measurement model is adequate or not. Reliability refers to the extent to which the construct variables are free from error and yield consistent results. And validity means that a variable differs or is discriminant from other variables. The results of the analysis of variables. Now, I hope this is not clear, but I'll be very brief. The reliability of items. Remember the items A1. A1 means attitude, A2 attitude, etc. The item loadings should exceed 0.5. This is the item loading, which signifies that all the items or indicators belong to the same construct. And all of them exceed 0.5, so they are very consistent. Next, for reliability, we also take into consideration the measure of Cronbach's alpha and composite reliability. And the threshold that has been suggested in the literature is 0.5, and most of the constructs exceed this threshold except frequency of use. How much time? I still have 5. Okay. Next, for validity, we have 2 types of validity. We have composite validity and discriminant validity. Composite validity refers with when if you want your constructs, the indicators belong to the same construct. If you have A1, A2, A3 belong to attitude, and they don't belong to other constructs, so you don't have confusion. And this is indicated by the AVE, which is the average variance extracted, and they should exceed 0.5 again as a threshold. Okay, I skip this. This is discriminant validity. As you see on the diagonal gives you the square AVE, which should exceed all the cross correlation between all the constructs, and this test also is positive. So, testing the hypothesis, we tested all the hypotheses using t-statistics, two-tailed t-statistics, using different levels of significance. As you can see, we start with hypothesis 1, and hypothesis 2, and hypothesis 3, and they have a relation with computer self-efficacy. You can see computer self-efficacy affects perceived ease of use at the 0.001. The 3 stars means that the significance is very high. So computer self-efficacy has a strong impact on perceived ease of use. It has a strong impact on attitude. It has a strong impact on perceived usefulness. So computer self-efficacy is a very important variable to take into consideration. Now, next, with regard to perceived ease of use, this has no effect on attitude. You have NS means the effect is not significant. It is not significant with regard to impact on attitude and on frequency of use. And it has only a small, weak effect on intention to use, which means that perceived ease of use is not an important variable compared to perceived usefulness. Usefulness is very important. It has a strong impact on attitude and a strong impact on intention to use, and finally a strong impact on frequency of use. This is summarized. So the majority of the hypotheses of this model have been supported, except for four hypotheses, mainly the effect of perceived ease of use on attitude and on frequency of use, and finally the effect of attitude on frequency of use and intention to use on frequency of use. So this research, which is still ongoing, I mean it's not been finalized, has tried to investigate the determinants, the deep determinants of students' acceptance of the Moodle, and we validated the model, the acceptance model. This model is very appropriate. Constructs like usefulness, computer usefulness, self-efficacy are very critical in explaining and predicting students' attitudes and usage of web-based learning, especially Moodle, and in a blended environment, because much research has focused on online, fully online education, especially in the Western tradition. So computer self-efficacy plays a very critical role in explaining the usage of Moroccan students. And according to Bandura's, a self-efficacy, whenever much self-efficacy you have, it will result in active learning process in students. Now, perceived ease of use only demonstrated a weak effect on attitude, and this finding concords with research by Lee, Saadi, and Park in Hong Kong, Canada, and Korea. Now, probably the reasons they give these researchers is that their students are digital natives. So maybe Moroccans have become digital natives, and for them, perceived ease of use is not really a critical variable that would really affect their acceptance of the system. And what is most important is that perceived ease of use does not have an effect on frequency of usage. What is more important is usefulness, whether the system is useful. Another reason, motivation, that would explain this result may be that my students have become familiar with Moodle, because I have given this questionnaire, as I told you, 2 months and a half into the program. So, and there are some studies that have found there is a difference between pre-use and after use of technology. So maybe this is due to after use, and they are no longer, they find the system easy to use, to get familiar. Again, another motivation, another reason is that the system of use, because the model system that I'm using is actually, I have been recommending the students. So it was not optional. It was not optional. It was not mandatory, not optional, but I've been really recommending them. So they think that it is very important for them to use this system in order to, to enhance their performance, get better grades, etc., etc. Very quickly, for the implications, I think that teachers and educators should